Hey everybody, Hoodoo Jedi here with another review for you. This time talking episodes 14 and 15 of Season 4 of The Flash, Subject 9 and Enter Flashtime, respectively. Sorry these reviews, having to do another two-episode review together. The last couple weeks have been kind of a little crazy, and recently I got seriously slammed at work, and also three of my favorite writers in the last couple of weeks have all released brand new books. Well, two of them released a new book, and then I discovered a new series that I really got into. So I've been using actually most of my free time to do some reading. And while I do strive to get these reviews out in a timely manner, as I have said from the beginning, the answer to the question, when is the next review for whatever going to come out, is always going to be whenever I feel like it. Anyway, let's kind of get right into it. So I thought these were both reasonably solid episodes. I definitely did like that they're taking some time to really flesh out Harry here. Like in the first episode, in Subject 9, we see that he kind of wants to make friends with Cecile simply because this is somebody who's his own age and, kind of would get his perspective as somebody who's a parent. And again, touching on the fact that basically back on Earth 2, Harry really had no friends. And it was sort of interesting to see his extremely awkward attempts to just sort of reach out and try and make friends with someone. Even when he's trying to be nice and trying to be helpful, Harry still kind of ends up acting like an asshole because that's just kind of how he's always been. And him attempting to genuinely be a nice person, well, it's awkward. But I do like that Cecile was genuinely moved by his desire to want to be friends with her. And with Enter Flashtime, we get a little bit more interesting insight into his relationship with his daughter, and we see that Harry is still just incredibly torn up by the death of his wife. Now that line, as some fans have noted about about the stars and stuff, that's identical to what Tess Morgan said to Earth 1 Harrison Wells before they were killed by Eobard Thawne, heavily implying that it was her counterpart on Earth 2 who was Jesse's mother. And I really do love the solution that they came up with for how Harry kind of bonds with her over the memory of his wife and her mother. There are limits to what words can do, and being able to share his thoughts, his memories that way of his wife was obviously very, very moving for Jesse. And so that was really nicely done. But kind of moving back to Subject 9, of course, Fiddler, Izzy is intended to be based on the character of the Fiddler, who in the comics is a male. Somebody has noted that there's a similar character called Virtuoso, who is female, but we're just going to kind of stick with that because the Fiddler is kind of a classic villain that's been around for quite a while. I did like this episode, and I thought they did make a decent effort at kind of getting, sort of fleshing Izzy out a little bit, but my real problem with this episode is that it does fall into what a lot of people, in my mind, call the whole women in refrigerators thing. Now, as I've mentioned before, I'm very leery of using that term because in this day and age, people throw that around basically any time a female character gets killed. And I think that is extremely disingenuous, as that's not really an accurate definition of what the situation is. Now, if you're not familiar with this term, it was coined by Gail Simone, very venerable, very talented comic book writer. Oh yeah, and I did like to mention in the episode here of Wade Street, in a reference to Mark Wade, another fantastic writer. But anyway, she was basically referring to a rather infamous scene from the Green Lantern comics, where newbie Green Lantern Kyle Rayner's girlfriend was murdered by a bad guy and her body stuffed into his fridge. And the way Simone defined this whole situation was female getting characters being killed solely for the development of story arcs and characterization for male characters. And I remember reading that story when it was originally published. And I'll concede that she did make a not unreasonable point. I would counter that that the writer Ron Marz did take some time to sort of flesh out Alex, the female in question, and that, me as a reader, I was genuinely upset that this character was killed. I thought she was a potentially extremely interesting person, and that this was just like the absolute last thing that I saw coming. And yes, this happened mainly to sort of further develop Kyle Rayner, the newbie Green Lantern in question's character. But I thought that was also well done. So while I do think that Gail Simone did raise a legitimate point, the way it worked out in that situation, I don't know. I can understand if this is just being like, just cheap, just like a cheap way to sort of motivate a male character and develop their character. But that's just really not how I think it played out ultimately in the story from which this concept gets its name. Sad to say, it actually does seem to be a little bit more applicable to this episode. We get to meet Izzy. Ralph develops obviously a bit of a crush on her, and when Izzy is killed, we get a very nice scene between Ralph and Barry where, Barry helps Ralph get down out of the dumps, and Ralph helps Barry kind of find a path to having a little bit of, a little bit more of his self-respect back. But again, it does seem like Izzy didn't really serve any particularly useful purpose except to advance what was going on with Ralph and Barry, and to a lesser extent, DeVoe. And again, they did take some time to kind of give Izzy a personality and make us kind of care about her. But it just didn't feel like to the degree of, like, for example, Alex, whom I referenced earlier, even though she was dead within like about 3 issues of being introduced. I don't know. That's just my personal view on it. But I will say that when they did kill Izzy, I do like how they handled the situation where Ralph and Barry realized it's like, we failed, we can't save her. Now, why Izzy doesn't try and use her powers to try and fight back against DeVoe, even though, yes, her fiddle is trashed, but she had already shown she can use her powers without that. But again, I think that would kind of just sort of cut away from the drama. And that whole situation of Ralph just saying to Izzy, just look at me. Did anyone else think of that whole look at the flowers thing from a couple of seasons back on Walking Dead? I don't know. I just, like, every time he said that, that was all I could think of. But, it really was sort of pretty hard to not feel for Ralph and Izzy in that situation. And it does also, in a way, further highlight just how terrible DeVoe is. Becky was shown, to have, been genuinely remorseful for her actions after being sent to prison. She really, really didn't want to hurt anyone else. And yet she's the one that DeVoe hurt the most of all by taking up residence in her body. And again, Izzy was somebody who had a tough life, but was finally on the verge of some real success in achieving her dream. And DeVoe comes along and destroys that, and destroys everything, takes her life, takes her body, and kills her in front of somebody who, if they'd had time, maybe there really could have been something there. Maybe not. But still, it was a very, very heartbreaking situation. Anyway, moving on to enter Flashtime. This episode, in terms of like the mythology and what's going on with the speedster stuff, I thought that was well done. And I did like the use of Eden Corps as the bad guys. I mean, it was just a very brief thing, but if you know your comics, Eden Corps are actually bad guys from the Green Arrow comics, who actually basically planned at one point to nuke Seattle, and Green Arrow literally died stopping them. Like he was actually legitimately dead for a couple of years before they brought him back, and it was during that time that Connor Hawke wore the mantle of Green Arrow. Anyway, the whole thing with the bomb, I mean, again, the bomb's just a MacGuffin to sort of see these moments like with, Barry having that absolutely awesome conversation with Iris, and, all like Cisco and Caitlin and all these other people, like everybody trying to work together, try and find some solution, and Barry finding himself in this situation where it's like, everything is failing. What do I do? What do I do? Nothing works. And I do like how, Jay Garrick can't help him, Cisco can't help him, Caitlin can't help him, Wells can't help him, Jesse can't help him, or at least they can't help him find the solution that saves the day. And at the end of the day, it's actually Iris who gives him that spark he needs to save the day, which I thought was nicely done, especially given what's coming down the line in the next episode. And it just goes to show you that the whole idea of saying, we're the Flash, it did kind of come off a little grandiose originally, but here, now, that seems very accurate, very, very believable. And I also like how Jay says, like, yeah, I'm kind of feeling my years here. It's maybe time to look into retiring, doing something else, and I need to finish training my replacement. And he specifically refers to his replacement as female. And, it's really heavily implied that this is intended to be Jesse. Well, okay, fair enough, but isn't Jesse, like, also the Flash on Earth too? I mean, that's kind of what I thought she was doing there. Is she spending a good chunk of her time there as the Flash of Earth too? So why is she going to abandon all of that to go and be the Flash on Earth 3? I mean, what happens if there are supervillains in Central City on Earth 2? I mean, granted, we've seen people splitting their time there. Wally was over there for a while, kind of helping her out, but still, I think this needs a little bit more fleshing out. I mean, maybe I'm overthinking the situation. But I can't help but wonder the idea of, Jay as this retired speedster. What is he going to do? And I don't know why, but I keep thinking of like Tina McGee and Mercury Labs. I just keep thinking that there's something big brewing there that we're going to get to see someday. I'm hoping like hell it's going to be Max Mercury, because I love Max Mercury. He's such a great character. And I think that if you sort of see Jay as this sort of retired speedster, that could also be another potential way that we might one day get to see Max Mercury on the show. Max Mercury, John Fox, just those are two other characters that I really, really would love to see on the show. John Fox would be especially interesting, given his origin, but and his connections to the 1 million era. But that's a totally different kettle of fish. Anyway, guys, I think I've rambled long enough, so I'm going to call it here. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. Of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi, and please also join me on Tumblr at Jedi Reviewer. Until next time, take care and have a good one.